What is a red flag from an employer that people might not immediately recognize as a red flag? When an employee quits or gets fired from the job and the company doesn't hire anyone new to replace them, it can be hard to tell as a red flag at first, but the temporary workload they added to your own over that was left over after the person left slowly becomes your new permanent workload, without any changes to your pay or benefits to compensate for the additional tasks. The further out it goes without the position being filled, the larger and more obvious the red flag becomes. This is such a good question. Here are some thoughts, and for context, I've started several companies, hired a lot of people, and consequently spent a lot of time thinking about how to develop positive cultures. The CEO boss whatever drives a conspicuously expensive car. I can elaborate why this is a tell if anyone cares. If it's a private family company, do a Google search for company name, defendant and company name, plaintiff. If the company has been sued, or is in the habit of suing others, that can be a red flag, although something there are legit reasons for either. But it's something worth paying attention to. If when you are asked to come in for an interview, you are not treated with total respect for your time, for example, if you find yourself waiting for extended periods for an interview because so and so is in a really important meeting. Similarly, if you are not offered at least water and or coffee if you're in for several interviews. I once interviewed at a place for 7 straight hours with no break, no food, not even a glass of water. Fortunately, I wasn't offered the job as it was at Michael Milken's firm, before he went to prison. If the company brings alcohol into the office for end of week sessions on a regular basis, I know they can be fun, but it's a stupendously bad idea for all kinds of reasons, and if leadership hasn't figured that out, then I'd think twice before joining. If when you're visiting the company for the first time and you pass someone in a hallway, do they smile and acknowledge your presence with a nod or maybe a hello? Or do they ignore you? It's a small thing but very telling about the workplace culture. Similarly, do people seem healthy and energized or grey-faced and tired? Any bait and switch deviations from representations made during the recruiting process versus actual terms conditions? If it's a job in a manufacturing or distribution facility, is it messy or tidy? Messy, cluttered facilities are indicative of poor management. Plus they can be dangerous. As others have noted, any BS about people like to work late or stuff like that used as pressure to get you to put in extra hours. Last, pay attention to your gut feel. If something feels off, it probably is. Just to add about your point about alcohol, if management have alcohol on the Friday but only for the front office sales team etc, it's a pretty big red flag too. Even more so if the CEO is actively on the sales team. Anything that the manager says in the interview that doesn't line up with the job description. Yay, we posted it's a manager level position, but this is actually a coordinator role. Yay, the description says travel is 25%, but it might be closer to 50, it just depends. We did post it as a remote job, but we prefer people to be in the office X days a week. Yay, we phrase it that way in the job description because corporate says we have to. All of those are red flags. Anything a company is vague about should be a red flag. Once we advertise this as a full-time permanent position, but every hire begins as a 1-year contract so we can get to know you. I've got no issue with a probationary period, but if you're only prepared to do a 1-year contract with a possibility of full-time, put that in the ad. When you don't get a review until you ask for a raise, then, all of a sudden, your work is being questioned and you're being berated. Yep. Going through this right now. 2 years working for the company and I asked for a raise. Now suddenly I have the owner's wife all over me digging into everything I have done and just making my life miserable. Trying to rush a decision out of you once the offer is made. I once interviewed with a company where I would have been relocating across the country to work for them. There were 3 rounds of interviews and they left me completely in the dark 4 weeks on end between each round before inviting me to the next round within just a few days of when the interview would take place. After the final interview, it was over a month of silence from them until they made an offer but told me I had less than 24 hours to let them know my decision. I would have been moving 2,000 miles away from home to a place I had never been or even seen before. Interviews were completely virtual. They wanted me to start 6 days after the offer had been made. When I asked if there was any flexibility for me to have more time to think it over or have more time to move out there, they said no. They needed the decision the next day, and if I accepted I would be starting in less than a week. I declined the offer. In other words, they hired someone other than you, who quit or was fired, and they needed to replace them ASAP. I know people, rightfully, like to hate on HR, but if a company brags about not having an HR department to deal with, expect them to be very disorganized at a minimum. I always ask the question, why is this role open? Is it a new role? Or am I replacing someone? Why did that person leave? This really helps you seeing their reaction, and if they look nervous, it's because the person who left did it because they were not happy. I also like asking how senior my team members are. If there's no one there more than 2 years, I would also be concerned. Final question. As I work in sales, I always ask what's the KPIs and how many are actually hitting their quarterly and annual target. This also reveals if they set their targets too high, and you can expect to enter a grim working culture where you're never good enough and can always do better. Last one. I like asking about how they are working to establish a team culture as well, since this will tell you a lot if people at work are friends or just there to do their job. The sink or swim technique. It was my first day as a cashier. I got a couple of hours of training. Then I was by myself and we were dead. All of a sudden this rush came in and I was asking for help. The manager goes, sink or swim, we're busy back here. Figure it out. LOL, I did, but let me tell you, customers were not happy because I still didn't know how to properly enter in orders, especially modifications. I had the same happen to me at Lowe's. I was put up in customer service without any training, all on my own. I straight up told customers that I didn't know how to process their return transaction, make special orders, do internet fulfillment because it was my first day and I had received no training. I called a manager over and the manager received some feedback from the customers. I interviewed once at a very huge organization that had a site in the town I was living in, and these guys were so proud of the new top of the line facilities. When they took me on a tour, they pointed out the lovely Zen garden area that was made for employees to go unwind and clear their heads. The problem with it was this area was positioned directly across from all the higher ups offices. You know. A similar one. They had an employee break area with games, TVS, snack machines, etc. But it was completely empty, in the middle of the day. Looked like no one had used it in weeks. Asking if you are somebody who's willing to put in the time to make sure deadlines are met, work is done, or if you're the type of person who leaves when the workday is finished. This is generally corporate speak for we will be forcing you to work unpaid overtime. A couple old senior partners, lots of young employees and nothing in between. That means there's no opportunity to move up. They can't get people to stay and can't get lateral transfers. They work young folks for as long as they can, and the young folks leave once they figure out the company sucks. We call that the 2-4-2-4-2-4 plan. Hire 24-year-olds, pay them $24K, work them 24 hours a day, and repeat. That's what they love about these 24-year-olds. Man. Company gets older, they stay the same age. Interviewed with a regional VP of $1 billion company for a sales role. When I asked if the position was a backfill or open due to growth, he stated a backfill. I asked if the person was promoted or moved to a new role, and his response was, we have had more people quit in 2021 than ever, and it's because they can't handle the pressure. Needless to say, I declined the next step in the hiring process. Multiple managers to report to. If you're being interviewed, hired, and they tell you will have multiple managers to report to, basically if there is not a clear chain of command, what'll happen is eventually one manager's directions, goals or instructions will conflict with the others, and you'll get caught in the middle of it, and one or both will use it against you in performance reviews. There's a misery wall when walking into work. When you pass a certain point in the building, the feeling changes significantly. If you know, you know. When they refuse to tell you what your starting salary would be, or when they just avoid the question altogether. Like I didn't apply to the job to be a part of some family work culture. I came here to get a job and be paid. If many provisions in company policy say except for employees in Colorado and California have multiple statutes that are more employee friendly than the other 48 states. So the company policy is basically saying we'll do X for employees where the state makes us, but frick the rest of you. The Colorado one applies a lot to postings now because CO requires salary ranges in postings, and we all know employers hate to give those. Anytime they are being sketchy, not being specific, or giving you the runaround in regards to basic questions you'd ask them, like expected work hours, pay and benefits. Work hard, play hard, you will work so hard, you and your colleagues will need to get totally fricked up at happy hours to cope with the stress. And you must attend happy hours. At my job interview I got asked how do you deal with drama in the workplace. Looking back, I was so stupid to accept that job. I got asked this, but it was also for a manager position. Honestly, I figured it was BC. Conflicts do arise from time to time between employees. Yeah, no, those conflicts were everybody sleeping with everybody else. I went on an interview. They had me wait in the lobby. In the 5 minutes I was sitting there, 3 employees walked past me. The first just looked at me and laughed. The second said leave. Leave while you can. The third made the sign of the cross at me. Later, during the interview, the hiring manager showed me the Zen room, which was a quiet room you got to go to for 10 minutes when you got too stressed out. I was offered the job. I declined. I have a Zen room at my job. It's called a stall in the public restroom. It's my crying stall. If you get a tour and everything is old but they say they're in the process of updating, yeah, no, they don't update crap. You're going to be working with broken outdated equipment. 9/10 you're going to get in trouble when it breaks on you. Living that Windows 98 life. When they say, or try to make you sign, anything pertaining to not discussing your wages with other employees, that crap is illegal and it screams that people aren't being fairly compensated for their work. I've literally up and walked the frick out of jobs for this. When they say, or try to make you sign, anything pertaining to not discussing your wages with other employees. Oh, I sign that crap. I sign that crap all day, and take a picture and or request a copy for my records. Frick yeah. Then I go to a labor attorney or the Department of Labor and start planning how to spend my settlement check, because that is highly illegal in the US. Any job ad that doesn't mention the name of the company should raise suspicions. Doubly so if it's anything to do with sales. Got done by that trick once. Turned up to the interview and the job was going door to door selling vacuums for Kirby vacuums. I responded to one of those that said it was a marketing role. It was telephonic sales for insurance. I've always found the hiring process to be a pretty accurate reflection of how your time with the company will be. So, if they make you jump through a million hoops just to be hired, you can expect any kind of raise or promotion to be the same. If they are asking you your thoughts on conflicts, then you can expect that you'll be working with at least one difficult person who is a known problem employee. If they say fast-paced tight deadlines, then expect to work overtime. If HR is a mess, then don't expect good onboarding etc. etc. The conflict question can also be in regards to customers or the type of work. Think auditing, complaints management, etc. Referring to the company as family. Employers are not your family. Family can't fire you. Saying you are work fam or anything else is a guilt trip to make you leave your real family and work extra hours for no pay. My company does this and it grosses me out. It works on our young hires but the older ones roll their eyes. Oh, and saying, this isn't your typical 9-5. That means you are on call 24/7. Also, companies that have a cult following and make up their own words. Run. Just run. During the interview process, I asked what industry conferences did they attend the previous year. The hiring manager responded, our project schedule did not allow us to attend any conference the previous year. There was another individual in the room and just laughed and blurted out, we have never gone to any events ever. During the same interview I got to tour their data center and it was basically filled with legacy junk. The one flag was all I needed. I got 2. Had an interview somewhere they offered 2023 starting. Being new in this field, when they asked how much I was expecting to be paid, I said, well, you guys are offering 2023 starting, and being new in the field I think 20 would be good. Their response was, oh, well, that's kind of a red flag for us. Usually when someone starts with us they'll say, I'll take $17 until I can prove to you that I'm worth the $20, so you'll see why we're hesitant. My response then, why would you offer $20 at your low end? I didn't get a call back. That's like all the places advertising starting at up to $15 an hour. I once had an interview with a company scheduled at 3. Company door was locked for safety of clients, so I stood out there for around 5 minutes knocking and calling the office number. The person who was supposed to interview me finally came out and told me they were heading home for the day and that they would call me the next day. The next day they called and offered me the job, and like an idiot I accepted it. That level of unprofessionalism was only a soft start to what really went down in that company. During my less than 5 months working there, 6 of my co-workers quit. When I finally quit and had to sign paperwork, my manager told me their office hours were from 8 to 6 that day. I came to the office at 4 knowing it should not be a busy time. They were already gone for the day. So essentially management did not keep to their schedule and they were always hiring due to their crazy turnover rate. I had a recruiter set me up with an interview at 9 AM. All the doors were locked when I got there, but there was a doorbell. No one bothered to answer the door until after 9. The recruiter called me the next day and told me that they weren't interested because I was late. Whenever an ad says flexible schedule, it never ever means that you can work when you want. It always means that they can schedule you anytime week to week without giving you any consistency. My last job, I could show up at work anytime between 6-10 AM, as long as I did my 8 hours before I went home, or 40 hours a week. You could go home early one day and work late the next to compensate for it. I love that. Having to take an online IQ test before even being considered for an interview. Backstory: when I moved to Australia, I was looking for work as a language teacher. I went in monster.com and found an advert saying that they were looking for teachers for gifted children, but that I needed to take an online IQ test to apply. Needed an IQ above 125 to go for an interview. I took the test, sent in my CV and cover letter, and waited. An hour later I get an email asking to meet at a special cafe in downtown Melbourne the following day. So, I go and notice that this building was a Freemason building and that one needed a special pass to get in. There was a little older lady waiting for me in a tacky floral print shirt and a white fisherman's hat. Immediately, she pardoned herself for wearing that hat, explaining that it was lined with aluminum to protect her from the cell phone radiation. I think nothing of it and order a coffee. Off the bat, the old lady tells me about how she has an IQ of 160 and the rarest blood type, similar to that of Tutankhamun. She goes on and on about this for a while and then begins explaining the job. She tells me that in the beginning, I wouldn't be teaching but administering tests in schools around Queensland to recruit children to special camps, where then I would be teaching. The whole thing screamed red flags, but I politely listened and got her business card if ever I had further questions. I got a proposal on the spot. I looked at the card and it said the wise ones. After looking it up, I noticed that it was a cult, similar to that of Universal Medicine. Family-owned businesses where several are working there. You will never be well paid or promoted. There's going to be a few siblings there that do absolutely nothing, but are going to be well paid. There are content just turning people over forever underneath them, but dangling a carrot. In software development, any take-home interview assignment that can't be finished in under 4 hours. Some shadier companies have been caught outsourcing labor for free this way, but even in the much less nefarious scenario where it really is just an evaluation, if a company has so little respect for your work-life balance that they're going to require a day's worth of unpaid labor just to interview, they are probably not going to respect it if they hire you either. Also, too much emphasis on how great their office amenities are often means they expect you to not leave the office. Usually the sweet spot is a decent snack selection and maybe a gym in the building if it's a shared office building. One football table or something isn't necessarily a red flag, but odds are nobody uses it. They get visibly and vocally freaked out when you tell them you have no social media. The follow-up question of everyone does, "You have to had made me walk out. A company that wants access to my personal family-only social media platforms is not a company I want to work for. I separate my personal and professional life. They have no business knowing about me or my family and anything going on therein. They do not need access to your Facebook, and should they gain it through another employee or other means, I would sue the freaking crap out of them for violating my right to privacy." One of my co-workers casually mentioned he was looking on Facebook and couldn't find me. I had preemptively blocked him, which turned out in retrospect to be a very smart move. I told him that was by design and walked off. The quality of the toilet paper in the bathroom. There are minimal if any cost savings to one ply, and it just shows they couldn't care about you at all. This is the best answer I've seen. Toilet paper tells all. The company I work for has always used one ply, and I will literally drive 20 minutes to take a crap than risk it. I once had a job that required a working interview as the final step in the interview process. I basically worked an entire day for free. I had a work interview, was paid minimum wage for it though. When I was properly hired, they gave me the posted wage. When they try to sell you on their work culture and workplace perks, you know that it's going to be a company that just wants to underpay young enthusiastic people who have more skills than they realize. These companies also usually talk about growing people a lot. They'll talk about training people and providing resources for you to self-learn, etc. They essentially want people who are enthusiastic about learning to join the company, skill up, and then underpay them for a flashy sounding job that they otherwise wouldn't be qualified for. Lots of young startup software companies are staffed by developers who had no dev experience or education before joining the company. The company cheers you on, pays for a few Udemy courses, and gives you a junior dev job earning much less than someone with a degree. They'll keep you for a long time too, because you only have experience, no education. Know your value. Don't stay in this kind of job longer than you have to. Build a personal portfolio. Start applying for dev jobs that pay more. Don't be afraid to get turned down. It's just an opportunity to hear what things they'd like to see on your resume. If you're smart but have no degree, those places can be good starting points. Obviously nothing long term. Just use it as a way to get experience in the resume and immediately start looking elsewhere while doing the bare minimum. Any place that keeps you waiting past your scheduled interview time. If they don't respect your time up front, they're not going to once you're hired. The company doesn't pay for coffee. Employees chip in if they want it in the office. Yeah, if you are too cheap to provide coffee, I will never get a raise. Overall poor ratings from bad employee reviews on Glassdoor. Seriously, that site exists to give employees a place to review their employer anonymously. Use that info. If you see too many 5-star ratings in a short amount of time, HR is making fake accounts to boost the Glassdoor rating. Just another heads up. The old company I worked at had 1-star reviews every week for IT roles, and HR started making accounts to write 5 stars to counter it every time to make the company rating 3 or 4 overall. HR is trying to game Glassdoor now. Look in the parking lot. What is the general age and condition of the employees' cars compared to the owners and managers? You can tell a lot about a medium to large-ish company if they have their employee parking lot full. We work hard, but we play hard. We're a family here. Listing something like fast-paced environment as a benefit. Having to buy your own uniform and or equipment. High turnover rate. If the interviewer says we're like a family here. When I was looking for a new job last year, my new interview question was, how did the company respond COVID-19? And after that I followed up with, what did the company do when the stay-at-home order was issued? Were employees still compensated or was hazard pay introduced? Maybe that's not entirely applicable, but I figure if a company does right by its staff in the worst of times, they'll probably do right by them during the best of times. I ended up declining positions at companies that decided their people shouldn't be put first, and now I work at fantastic company. The job I quit in July gave us a take-home lasagna dinner. I started at a different place in October and asked what the company gave them, and the HR guy said they each got $1,000. Optional overtime always offered. You'll always be pressured. family environment will use your sense of guilt against you. Needing people who plan to stay. Turnover is high. Be prepared to leave in less than a year. Once I applied for a sales position ad. When I got there were 30 people in the waiting room. The interview process took hours as we were interviewed in groups and people were cut as the day went on. Kind of reminded me of a popularity contest. They had no respect for my time. I felt so down the rabbit hole at one point that I was like, I'm just gonna have fun with this and try to win the game. Well, I ended up being chosen and the boss man was like, we usually don't pick women, so good for you. You remind me of Natalie Portman, do you have any questions? I was like, yeah, what's the product I'm selling? Yeah, it was door-to-door knife salesman. Ah, Cucko, I remember them. Unlimited time off means that you will never be taking time off. Ever. Management will judge the heck out of you for attempting to take a mental health day or a vacation. The people who take the least time off will wear it like a badge of honor. The last place I worked like this, the owner would lecture us every year about how he's never taken Thanksgiving or Christmas off, and look how well the company is doing. Then he'd give you the stink eye when you wanted to take off to be with your family for those holidays. Really depends on the culture of the company. I worked at 3 companies with unlimited PTO and would take 4-5 weeks off and some days here and there on average. In fact, I want either unlimited or 20+ days PTO. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.